Doctors of Reddit, what is the strangest thing a patient said they had that actually turned out to be true? A patient walked in the clinic with a complaint of fever. I noticed his hands were very yellow. He did have a history of alcoholism, but no other signs. I told him his hands suggest he is jaundiced and will need tests. He laughed and said, "Oh no, I just dusted my hands with turmeric." Did you get an explanation? Or is that it? Was it to con his way into a room? Some people believe it helps with arthritis, but a fake that's also supposed to be turmeric paste. Maybe this guy thought dusting was the way to go. Obligatory, not a doctor, but a medical student. On my mental health placement there was a guy I saw on a home visit who was convinced his neighbor was trying to kill him. This guy had a history of mental health problems and the doctors were sure he was psychotic, and all of this was in his head. However, a few days later the doctor went round for another home visit and found his neighbor trying to climb through the window with an axe. The poor man wasn't psychotic at all. His neighbor was actually trying to murder him, and everyone thought he was just mad. My grandfather had schizophrenia, and for years told us that someone was poisoning his water. We all ignored him until one day when one of my uncles tested his water, and it turns out it was actually unsafe to drink. Everyone felt really bad for ignoring his complaints for years. However, it probably wasn't the Soviets who did it as he claimed. Worked on the ambulances for a stint when I was fresh out of uni. One day I was transferring to another county with an elderly patient with such severe dementia he didn't remember his own wife or even his name. The whole ride there, he was happily chatting away, telling me that he was an ex-international footballer, about his big victories, and how he owned a business with David Beckham, mixed in with other psychedelic nonsense. I just kept asking him questions to keep him occupied and chatting. But in my head I was thinking it was just a funny side effect of his dementia. So we arrive at the new hospital and his lovely wife is waiting there. Me and my crewmate transferred him to his hospital bed and his wife shook our hands and thanked us profusely for being so kind with him. She said, "I know he's a bit of a handful. Did he say much on the way?" And I said yes. He was telling us about being an international footballer and that he owned a business with David Beckham. She scoffs and says, "You told these nice people you were David's business partner? You only met him a couple of times." When I asked how he knew him, she explained that he had indeed been an international football player and was well known for heading the ball. In fact, the doctors thought that's why he developed the dementia. I was so shocked. I'll never forget him. Not a doctor, but a combat medic in the army. Had a private heat stroke on me, and on his journeys back and forth between consciousness, he stated my butthole hurt, but feel really good to in a slurred outburst. I looked at him, trying not to burst out laughing. "Why yes, private, there's a rectal thermometer in your no-no square." My boyfriend took one of our cats to the vet recently for a suspected UTI/kidney issue, and when the vet took her temperature rectally, in a room with a handful of interns, he says, "You're really not supposed to purr during this part. My parents' cat will purr with any human contact." Getting rectal thermometers included. I had a bone replacement surgery, up a third of the tibia, and it was fixed in place to heal with a titanium plaque and screws. One day the plaque broke, and I went to the ER and told the doctor that I had a broken piece of titanium and he called it bullshit. His face after seeing the x-ray with the plaque separated in two pieces was priceless. How the fuck did the plate break? Because of the pressure. Some physics thing. Apparently the bone implant is weak and the titanium holds all the pressure from walking, and since bones are slightly elastic and the metal is not, the pressure makes it break. Jokes are on me though, as it has happened 3 times, with all the implications of having to go through surgeries and replacements and blah blah blah. In the last surgery I had removed 6 screws that were also torn apart. My daughter had a fall on the trampoline when she was 3. She let out this really weird scream, then went pale, quiet, and sweaty, and wouldn't let us touch her arm. We only live 5 minutes from the hospital. So I put her in the car and drove there. She slept in the car. We get to the hospital and check in, and she's found her second wind. The triage nurse rolled her eyes at me when I asked for an x-ray, but ordered one anyway. At this point my daughter was literally pirouetting around the waiting room. I was starting to doubt myself. Even the x-ray technician was laughing at us. About 5 minutes after the x-ray is taken, a very red-faced triage nurse runs out to the waiting room and firmly tells me to stop my daughter from dancing. She's broken her arm and they don't know if she will need surgery or not. She didn't need surgery in the end, but spent 6 weeks in a plaster cast. It turns out she's badass and has a great pain threshold. Love her. Not a doctor, but a patient. In January this year, the side of my face grew bigger and bigger, and I was in extreme pain. I go to my GP and tell him looks like mumps, don't ya think? But he brushes it off saying I got my vaccines. He sends me to the because he does not know what I have and how to treat it. After 5 hours in the they finally get my blood tested for the mumps. Turns out you can still have the mumps even though you're vaccinated. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why the rest of us need to be immunized. Heat immunity, guys. I'd immunity too, definitely. Unfortunately for me, autoimmune condition and upcoming way overdue immune suppressants to combat it. If coronavirus is done and dusted in time. Fun times. Inpatient psych ward, when I was a medical student, we admitted a guy who was having psychotic delusions. He lived in a holler, a small valley between 2 mountains. For weeks, he had been absolutely preoccupied by this idea that the mountain was going to fall on his house. He would spend days at a time without sleep finding rocks, branches, and other junk, and piling them up behind his house, because the mountain's gonna fall down on my house. I guess this wasn't the first time this happened, because the family brought him in saying he was off his meds, working himself to death, to build a pile of junk behind his house. He's admitted for a week or 2, goes to group therapy, has his meds adjusted, and he's doing well. We decide he's been tuned up and ready to be discharged. His family comes to pick him up, but they have this grim look on their face. We are bringing him back to the hotel. Yesterday there was a landslide. It destroyed the house. Patient here. This is a case where the doctor called bullshit on what I had. Broke my arm once. There was a huge waiting time at local hospital, so I decided to go to another hospital the next morning. I slept really badly, but managed to have like 3 to 4 hours of sleep, instead of waiting the whole night awake in a waiting room. When I explained what happened to the doctor, she said it was not broken, because if it was I would never be able to sleep with it. So I get used to the idea I did not break my arm. I stay there for the scans, because it was swelled, and wait. The doctor came back with 2 pills of morphine saying I had incredible pain tolerance, and that my arm broke at 3 places. She then explained I needed a surgery the same day and they are making place for it on the agenda. I can still remember her face when explaining to me the procedures of the surgery, knowing she told me earlier it was not possible. A patient had a bullet in her ear. Did a double take on that one? Did it get there via a gun? Or just kinda fallen or something? Drive-by shooting. Apparently not worth taking out for the surgeons. Could see it plain as day with the otoscope. Huh. They almost got hit in the brain. How lucky would that bastard be to get shot in the ear canal and survive? I tore the ligaments in my knee when I was 12 and the doctor had a difficult time getting the stitches out. One broke and he decided to leave it under my skin, telling my parents it would dissolve. When I was 16 I banged my knee against something and out popped the end of the stitch. I went to the doctor to get it removed. You could see a long curly blue thing under my skin. I insisted this was the remaining stitches. My doctor just thought it was a vein. She froze a small area around the protruding stitch and pulled on it. She pulled out 2 or 3 inches of curly stitching. She held it up, looking shocked, and said, "I have to go show the other doctors this," and left the room. Schizophrenic lady told us someone was trying to kill her. Turns out someone shot up her house in a drive-by while she was in the psych unit. Patient here. I broke the same rib 11 times over the course of 3 years, but the doctor often wouldn't even order X-ray. She just said it wasn't healing right. Give it time. I tell her there's something else going on. She dismisses me. Finally, after the 11th time, she says fine, we'll X-ray. X-ray shows a mass. Mass is biopsied. I have a tumor. The tumor was weakening the bone to the point that it broke when I reached into an upper cabinet for the sugar. Had that bad boy, named him Adam, removed in 2018. 1 week hospital stay, worst surgery I can imagine, and now I'm doing great. Nurse. I had a patient in her late 70s talk about how her mom was upstairs and died last night. I used to work neuro, and so confused old people was our gig. So I just listened like HMM. Wow, okay, and did my job. I told another staff member about how she wouldn't stop talking about her mom being upstairs and dying last night, and they said it's true. Her 98-year-old mom died in our ICU last night. I checked the roll in the morgue and lo and behold, her mom's name was on it. Well, okay then. Reminds me of a patient of mine that came delirious, but insisted his mother was alive. Patient was in his 70s. I thought it was part of the delirium, but when he recovered it actually turned out his mother was in his 90s and still alive. Occupational therapist here. I was gathering a social history on an elderly patient. Asked who she lives with. She told me she lives with her 6 dogs and 200,000 bees. I was like, yup, this lady has post-operative delirium. Called her son to get the real social history. He was like, yeah, she's a beekeeper and she adopts old dogs. Patient told me her head felt funny inside. She was intermittently confused. Her family thought she was just bullshitting to get some attention. One head caught later, and she's got a big fuck off type bleed going on. I dislocated my knee for the 2nd time when I was about 18, simply sliding into a booth at a bar. Screamed at the sudden pain, and one of my friends called an ambulance. Only problem was that it had popped back in by the time the ambulance got there. They decided that I couldn't possibly have dislocated it. Fast forward about 9 years, when, after many more dislocations of my knees, shoulders, and wrists and finally a cancer scare, because my boobs suddenly changed shape, they discovered that my ligaments just weren't holding me together properly. It was my physiotherapist that advised I ask to be referred for an Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis. And when I asked, I was told you can't possibly have that. Your skin springs back straight away. I insisted, and about 6 months later I was finally referred to a rheumatologist. Spoiler alert, I have Ehlers-Danlos. Nurse here. My confused patient told me my heart's on the opposite side. Didn't think anything of it till his chest x-ray confirmed. Elaborate please. Could be 2 things. There is a condition called situs inversus, where the internal organs are mirrored and grow on the opposite side of the body. There's also a condition called dextrocardia, where the heart alone is on the right side of the chest, instead of the left, where it normally is found.